Hey guys, Travis here, and today I wanted to do a little video on why spiritualism is important to me, why I consider myself a spiritualist, and what is spiritualism. So first I think we have to look at people's perception of the word spiritualist. When I speak of spiritualism in the context that I do, I'm speaking of spiritualism in the sense of modern spiritualism. Modern spiritualism is not this idea of, oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, which is what I think a lot of people conflate spiritualism with, because there's such a new age, sort of soaked view of spirituality and spiritualism, and they often get placed in the same box. Modern spiritualism is a movement, it's a philosophy, it's a religion, some people consider it a science, and also a way of life, that started in 1848 in Hydesville, New York. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Fox sisters, Maggie, Kate, and Leah. And Maggie and Kate lived with their mother and father in a cottage in Hydesville, New York. And as the story goes, one evening they started hearing rappings. And those rappings turned into communications, and people from far and wide came to witness these communications. And it sort of, upset John and Marguerite, the mother and father, and they went to stay with older siblings. Now, Leah, the oldest sister, also developed as a medium. Now, there's lots of historical things that you can look up concerning the Fox sisters. Some say it was a complete hoax, others say it was absolutely genuine, some people say it was a mixture. However, regardless of where you fall on the fence or on what side of the fence, it ignited this wave of spirit communication and people seeking to connect to a different type of spirituality. You have to remember that this is a movement that sort of began around the Civil War era. And so people were not living very long because they didn't have the advances in medicine that we have today. People were dying in war, and people just wanted to connect with their loved ones and know that they survived this thing that we call physical death. And so not only did it take off like wildfire in the United States, it spread all over the world, and it became very popular in Europe and the UK, where it's still highly prevalent today. Two mediums in the UK, Lillian Bailey and Estelle Roberts, actually performed such convincing demonstrations of evidential mediumship that it helped to cement spiritualism as a recognized religion. Now, the older sister, Leah, some people, I think, kind of view her a little bit as sort of a stage mom-esque figure, kind of coercing the two younger ones to really capitalize upon this. And I think a lot of times it's those who tend to view the inception of spiritualism as a bit of a hoax who have that viewpoint. And it may or may not have been true that she was that way, but one thing that I do think Leah understood that maybe Kate and Maggie did not was just how huge and important spiritualism was and had the potential to be. So spiritualism really is a religion that is based in the idea that we survive this thing that we call physical death, and that we can prove continuation of individuality after this so-called death through evidential mediumship. So, spiritualism, as I've mentioned, is a recognized religion. There are churches, and part of me sort of explaining why I consider myself a spiritualist is going through and really understanding the principles of the spiritualist religion. I often would say I'm not a religious person. I grew up Pentecostal, Christianity didn't make sense to me, but spiritualism is a religion that I feel comfortable saying, yes, I'm a part of, and I consider myself this. So let's take a look at the principles. The first principle is that of infinite intelligence. We believe in infinite intelligence. You can call this God, Source, the universe, Creator, Mother, Father, God, whatever you want to call it. Spiritualists don't view God as a being, a separate being that exists outside of us. We are part of it. That Source, God, universal, divine energy is in all things, and a spark of that exists within us. That's our spirit. So God for us is an impersonal force. And as we seek to know that, we grow and develop spiritually. 2, we believe that the phenomena of nature, both physical and spiritual, are the expression of infinite intelligence. Creator, God, source, isn't just, what it created. It's the creator, it's the creation, it's within all things. And just like physics and the universe is governed by physical laws, there are also natural spiritual laws that tend to govern the world, and that when we live, in harmony with that, things go easier. We progress differently. Which leads us into number 3. We affirm that a correct understanding of such expression and living in accordance therewithin constitute true religion. So just to give an example of what some of these, what we would call in spiritualism, natural law or spiritual laws are, there's vibration, attraction, correspondence or correlation, polarity, gender, rhythm. The Secret was very new agey and sort of capitalized on law of attraction, but there are many spiritual laws that kind of govern the world that we live in, and so it applies to every area of our life. And so as we understand what these laws are and work in harmony with them instead of against them, we progress in a different sort of way. Number 4, we affirm that the existence and personal identity of the individual continue after this change that we call death. That we don't lose our individuality, that we don't cease to exist, that we don't automatically become a saint, that this side and the spirit side are just 2 sides to the same coin, and our personalities remain the same. And we demonstrate this through mediumship, hopefully effectively communicating the personality of the communicator, our link in spirit that's coming through for a sitter. Number 5, we affirm that communication with the so-called dead is a fact proven by the phenomena of spiritualism. This is the one that I really love, because it's basically saying other religions ask you to believe just because, and that's why they call it faith. This book says that it's true. This prophet said that it was true. I can't prove it to you, but it's written and we trust it, so you take it on faith, and that's your belief. In spiritualism, we say this is what we believe to be true, but don't take my word for it. Let me show you. Let me demonstrate to you that life continues, and hopefully give such convincing expression of the spirit world that you say, yes, that was my loved one. Things that came through were only things that they could have known. The only way that this person could have known that is if my loved one was alive and okay and well and communicating from the spirit side of life. So we're not saying to have a blind faith. We're saying, this is what we believe, and I'm going to show you. And maybe you'll believe, maybe you won't. But the decision and the choice is up to you. Number 6 is pretty common sense. I think it's something that anybody of any faith or any background can get on board with. We believe that the highest morality is contained within the golden rule, do unto others. Basically, don't be a dick. Be nice to other people. Judge not. That's something I think everybody can get on board with. Number 7, we affirm the moral responsibility of individuals, that we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey and disobey and work for and with and against natural law. Basically, it all comes down to personal responsibility. To contain, that's sort of a wordy way of saying it. Number 7 is basically personal responsibility. That when something goes right in your life, it's not because some celestial being is blessing you. And if something goes wrong in your life, it's not because some sinister being is trying to pull you down. The devil didn't make you do it. An angel didn't bless your day. You made a choice. And like natural law, the law of cause and effect, you choose A equals B. You choose B equals C. If you make this choice, these are the possible outcomes. And the only person that you have to blame is yourself. not that blaming serves anybody, but I'm saying that you can't use a scapegoat spiritually or personally, and that means that you have to do the work on yourself. If you're unhappy, you have to do the work to understand why you're unhappy and help to make yourself happy, because no outside force is going to fix that for you, just in the same way that no outside force is going to try to spiritually attack you or bring you down. Basically, take responsibility for your own shit. Number 8, we affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul here or hereafter. Basically, everybody is redeemable. Everybody has a second chance. And even if you don't get it right here, we're still continually growing and progressing. There's never an end point. We're always seeking to grow and evolve and do better. And forgiveness and redemption and compassion are available for us in life, and they're available for us in the afterlife. And lastly, we affirm that the precepts of prophecy and healing are divine attributes proven through mediumship. So I want to take a moment here to say a lot of churches, a lot of the spiritualist churches are Christian spiritualist churches or have Christian spiritualist leanings, and that kind of means that a lot of people like to go back and look biblically at a lot of the examples of phenomena and sort of say, hey, we have sort of modern day comparisons, especially when you look at the older days of spiritualism and physical mediumship. You know, for example, the Transfiguration on the Mount, Jesus, or not Jesus, but God appearing to Moses as a cloud and the voice of the trumpet. Okay, is that a reference to direct voice? Or, things appearing or disappearing? That's what we might call apports. And that's great if you want to look at it that way. But I do think that it's worth saying that, biblically, especially in the book of Corinthians, if you are in one of these spiritualist churches that have Christian flavoring, the gifts of the Spirit are really expressed in the book of Corinthians. And I believe it was St. Paul, who is associated with those books, speaks of the spiritual gifts, or the gifts of the Holy Spirit, are available to everybody, and the one that we should all seek to strive for is prophecy. And so if you look at what some people might call prophets in the old days, they saw things, heard things, felt things. And so I'm not saying, because I think it's somewhat egotistical that genuine modern day mediums are prophets. I think there was a little bit of a vernacular sort of issue, but that everybody has these spiritual gifts that are latent within them that we can access. And for some of us, that includes mediumship and healing and teaching and things like that. Now, I love spiritualism. I love spiritualism as a philosophy, as a way of life. I love it from sort of trying to look at what we do and explain it in a scientific way. But spiritualism has been dying. And it saddens me, because at one point in America, in our history, 1 in 10 people were a spiritualist. And now if you mention spiritualism today in casual conversation in the United States, most people don't know what you're talking about. And it's so interesting that when we take surveys and polls, about roughly 70% of people believe in life after death and things like angels and ghosts and stuff like that. So that's, if we look at the fact that there's almost 3.5 million people in the United States, 70% of those people at one point in history would have been spiritualists, and yet they have no idea what it is. And if you go into the spiritualist churches, in the United States, there's very few. If you go to the UK, it's much more thriving than it is here. But very few people know what spiritualism is. If you go into these churches, there's very little numbers, very low membership, and the membership that is there are usually people of an older generation. There is not youth. And if that doesn't shift or change, I worry for the future of spiritualism as an organization, as a religion. Spiritualism, not necessarily modern spiritualism, spiritualism with a little s, or spirit-seeking practices, have always been around from the inception of time and always will be around. But spiritualism as we know it today has a very rich philosophy and has shaped society society much more than people realize, has shaped history much more than people realize. Spiritualists historically have always been at the leading edge of progress. The early spiritualists were the first suffragettes, were the first abolitionists, were standing there for gay rights, and had so many interesting influences on society. Abraham Lincoln, his wife was a spiritualist. Some people say that he secretly was a spiritualist. They had seances at the White House. This is something that a lot of people don't know, and there's so many different areas like that is influenced by spiritualism. And so it really saddens me to kind of see the state that it's in today in the United States. I think that one of the detractors that has contributed to this decline is that less and less people are identifying as religious. And yet, at least here in the United States, if you look at most spiritualist churches, they're Christian spiritualist churches or have Christian flavors. And while I'm not bashing Christianity, I have nothing against it. It's not for me personally. But the younger generations aren't interested in singing stuffy hymns. And they aren't interested in dull services. And I think that there needs to be much more of an updating and a modernizing and more community outreach. And I know a lot of times spiritualist communities and camps lack the funds, but I don't think that that's an excuse. I don't think that that is too huge of a stumbling block. The other thing to consider, I talked about, at the real height of spiritualism was at an era where lots of people were enmeshed in war and losing people at a very young age. And we have a new sort of experience of that modernly, which is this opioid and heroin overdosing crisis. I can't tell you in my personal practice over the past 5, 6, 7 years, what percentage, a huge percentage of my mediumship sessions and clients are those seeking to connect with someone who had some sort of an addiction or overdosed in some way. It's incredibly sad. And so these are people who really could benefit from not only the philosophy of what spiritualism offers, but the healing that can come from connecting them with their loved one in the hereafter. So I think that there needs to be outreach for younger people. I think that there needs to be an updating, and in a lot of ways I think that that includes sort of dropping the Protestant Christian flavoring. I don't know how that may work exactly, but I know that it's doable in a way that doesn't compromise what we believe. It's doable in a way that doesn't diminish the spiritual importance and the sacredness of what we do as mediums. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit too long, but spiritualism is something that I'm very passionate about. If you have any questions about spiritualism, drop your questions below. Otherwise, I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day, my friends.